Thanks for tuning in again. You won't believe the chaos I'm about to unravel today. Get ready for a story that'll leave you speechless. Here's the first one. As a 22-year-old guy working for his dad's hardware store, my family thought it would be funny to leave me stranded in another state. Let's see if he can make it back. They laughed and drove away. I never came back. 15 years later, they found me. 107 missed calls. That summer I turned 22 was supposed to be like any other. Working at my dad's hardware store for pay. Living at home because college wasn't practical according to Banks, my father. And being the eternal punching bag for my golden child brother Alan. We weren't poor exactly. But we sure as hell weren't the type who took vacations to Disney. So when Banks announced we were taking a family road trip to my uncle's wedding in Colorado, I should have known something was up. 3 days into that nightmare road trip, I was already regretting not making up some excuse to stay home. My dad and Alan had been taking turns with their favorite game, making Salvador's life hell. Mom, Irene, would occasionally say that's enough in that weak voice of hers. But we all knew it was just for show. Look, I need to explain about my family. Banks wasn't just your standard dad. He was the type who'd wake you up at 3 a.m. to yell about a chore you forgot. Who'd throw away your stuff if it was in his way. Who'd been telling me I was worthless since I could understand words. Alan learned quick. Either be dad's mini-me or become like me. Guess which path he chose. That morning we stopped at some nowhere rest area in Colorado. Middle of absolutely nothing for miles. Just fields, mountains in the distance, and a sad little bathroom building with vending machines. I'd been sleeping in the back of our Suburban and needed to stretch my legs. Use the bathroom. Dad and Alan were laughing about something while Mom was checking her makeup in the visor mirror. I remember exactly what I was wearing. Faded Metallica t-shirt, jeans with a hole in one knee, and these beat-up Vans I'd had forever. I didn't take my phone because it was charging in the car. Didn't take my wallet because why would I? We were in the middle of nowhere and I was just taking a leak. 10 minutes. That's how long I was in that bathroom. Maybe less. When I walked out squinting in the Colorado sunshine, the parking spot was empty. Our dark green Suburban was gone. At first I thought they'd moved it. Playing some stupid prank. I walked around the entire rest area. Nothing. That's the thing about betrayal from your own blood. It hits different than any other kind. I waited an hour sitting on the curb, telling myself they were just trying to scare me and would be back. People came and went. A few giving me weird looks. A trucker asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was waiting for my girlfriend who was in the bathroom. He nodded and left. After hour 2, I started to get that cold feeling in my gut. They weren't coming back. My first instinct was to borrow someone's phone, call them, beg them to come get me, but as I was about to approach a mom with 2 kids, something stopped me. A lifetime of memories flashed through my head. Every humiliation. Every time they'd laughed at my expense. Every joke that was really just cruelty with a punchline. I could almost hear them. Alan's voice. Dude, I bet he's crying right now. My dad. He'll figure it out if he's not as stupid as he looks. My mom's weak protest that didn't actually change anything, so I made a decision. I approached that mom and asked to use her phone. But I didn't call my family. I called information and got the number for the nearest shelter in Grand Junction, about 40 miles away. Then I asked her if she could possibly give me a ride into town. Told her my family had an emergency and had to leave but were sending someone for me later. She hesitated, but I must have looked harmless enough because she agreed. That first night at the shelter was a reality check. I had nothing but the clothes on my back. No ID. No money. No contacts. The shelter guy, Dave, let me use their computer to look up my uncle's address from the wedding invitation I'd seen. I thought maybe I could get to the wedding, find my family there. But then I sat staring at the screen and thought, why? Why chase after people who literally abandoned me on the side of the road for laughs? Instead, I created a new email account. I looked up resources for people who needed emergency ID replacement. I Googled jobs that pay cash. I made a plan. 2 days later, I was washing dishes at this little diner called Sonny's. The owner, Geraldine, was this 60-some woman with purple-streaked gray hair and more tattoos than you'd expect. I'd wandered in, asked if they needed help. Told her my wallet was stolen, but I needed work. She sized me up and said, "Dishwasher quit yesterday. You steal from me, you're dead. Start now." That's the thing about rock bottom. You can only go up from there. For a week I worked doubles. Slept at the shelter. Wore donated clothes. Dave helped me start the process of getting a replacement ID by contacting vital records in my home state. I set up a cheap pay-as-you-go phone from Walmart with the first cash I earned. 7 days after they abandoned me, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was my mother, voice shaking. Where was I? Was I okay? They'd been looking everywhere. It was just supposed to be a joke. They'd waited down the road for 20 minutes, came back and couldn't find me. In the background, I could hear my dad saying to tell me to stop being dramatic and get my ass to Uncle Rick's. I heard Alan laughing. Salvador, are you there? Say something. We've been worried sick. That cold feeling in my gut was gone. Now there was just clarity. You wanted to see if I could make it on my own, I said, my voice steadier than it had ever been when talking to them. Watch me. I hung up, blocked the number. Then I blocked every family number I could remember for good measure. I went into the Verizon store the next day and changed my number completely. 27 missed calls before I changed that number. I imagined them getting more and more pissed when they realized their punching bag wasn't coming back to be punched. A month later, I had my own studio apartment above a laundromat. It was tiny and smelled like fabric softener all the time. But it was mine. I worked my way up to prep cook at Sonny's. And Geraldine was teaching me how to properly chop vegetables without losing a finger. Sometimes I'd check my old email. The one my family knew. Messages piled up. From Mom. Please come home, we're sorry. From Dad. This childish stunt needs to end now. From Alan. Dude, it was just a joke. Stop being such a... I never responded. Not once. That's the thing about freedom. Once you've tasted it, there's no going back to the cage. Look, I won't pretend it was easy. Some nights I'd scroll through Instagram, see pictures of people with normal families who actually loved each other, and I'd feel this ache that no amount of time could fill. I had nights where the loneliness felt like it would swallow me whole. Holidays were the worst, but every morning I'd wake up in my shitty little apartment that smelled like Downy, go to my dishwashing job where nobody called me worthless, and build my life. One brick at a time. 3 months after they left me at that rest stop, I checked my email one last time. There was a new message from my mom. Your grandmother is asking about you. Please just let us know you're alive. I closed the email. Deleted the account. Threw my old SIM card in the dumpster behind Sonny's that night. Geraldine taught me how to make her famous apple pie. Said I had good hands for pastry. It was the first genuine compliment I could remember getting in years. I never looked back. Update 1. 5 years after being abandoned at that Colorado rest stop, I found myself staring at a familiar face on my Facebook feed. Not because I was stalking my family's profiles. Okay, maybe I was. But because Alan had just been tagged in a local news article back home. He'd gotten a DUI, wrapped his car around a telephone pole. Nobody heard except the pole. The newspaper had used his high school football photo. He looked so young, so smug. Nothing like the bloated mugshot underneath. That's the thing about karma. It moves at its own pace. But it never forgets an address. By then, I'd built something resembling a life in Colorado. My crappy studio above the laundromat had eventually been traded for a one-bedroom with actual windows. I'd worked my way up from dishwasher to line cook to assistant manager at Sonny's. Geraldine still ran the place with an iron fist in a flour-dusted glove. But she'd started treating me less like a charity case and more like, I don't know, a weird nephew or something. My first big purchase when I had actual savings was a decent laptop. Nothing fancy. Just enough to take online classes through the community college, business management, basic accounting. The stuff banks always said was for people who can't do real work. I'd spend my mornings at Sonny's, afternoons studying, evenings back at work. Rinse and repeat. Look, I won't pretend I wasn't still messed up from what happened. Trust issues. More like trust subscriptions that I could cancel anytime someone got too close. I'd made exactly 2 friends in 5 years. My neighbor Doug, who played bass in a terrible garage band and sometimes brought me homemade beer that tasted like hoppy dishwater, and Geraldine, if she counted as a friend and not a boss. That changed when Kendra started coming into Sonny's every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork, always ordered the same thing. Denver omelet, no tomatoes, extra coffee, always sat at the counter with a textbook. Med school, I later found out. She had this way of completely zoning out while studying, fork halfway to her mouth for minutes at a time. I started timing her once. Record was 7 minutes 23 seconds before she realized she was holding cold eggs. 4 months of me bringing her coffee refills before she actually looked up and saw me. I mean, really saw me. Her eyes did this thing where they widened just a little, and she said my name tag was spelled wrong. It wasn't, but it became our weird little joke. I'd wear a different wrong name every Tuesday and Thursday. Salvador. Salvador. Salvador, she'd point out. I'd act surprised, stupidest flirting in human history, but it worked. Our first date wasn't even supposed to be a date. Her study group bailed last minute. She had a reservation at this pizza place that was impossible to get into, and I happened to be wiping down the counter when she got the cancellation text. Next thing I knew, I was sitting across from her at Antonio's, both of us awkwardly realizing this looked exactly like a date. 6 months later, she moved into my apartment. A year after that, we got a slightly bigger place together. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom with a bathroom where the toilet didn't run constantly and neighbors who didn't practice space solos at 2 a.m. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on my family through fake accounts. Not proud of it, but there it is. Dad's hardware store started struggling after the Home Depot opened on the edge of town. Saw him ranting about it on community Facebook pages, posts getting increasingly desperate and bitter. Mom's social media became this weird shrine to family, constant throwback pictures of us all smiling, posts about missing her boys, plural, which was rich. She'd tag Alan, but never mention me, like I'd been erased. Alan bounced from job to job, lots of vague booking about haters and new opportunities, the classic social media smokescreen of someone whose life is circling the drain. 3 years in. Geraldine took me aside during inventory and told me she was thinking about opening a second location of Sonny's on the other side of town, asked if I'd be interested in running it, not owning, running, important distinction. I didn't sleep that night, kept thinking it was some kind of test or joke. People like me didn't get opportunities like that. Banks had made sure I understood that much. That's the thing about poisonous beliefs, they stay in your system long after you've escaped the snake. But I said yes, because Kendra, half asleep beside me, mumbled that I'd be stupid not to, because Doug, through a haze of weed smoke when I mentioned it, said, duh, you practically run the original place already, because Geraldine wasn't Banks. Wasn't my family and had never once made me feel like I was worthless. Sonny's East opened 6 months later, smaller than the original, different menu, my menu. I worked 90-hour weeks that first year, lost 10 pounds I couldn't afford to lose, fought with Kendra about never being home, came home to passive-aggressive post-its on the fridge more than once, but it worked. People came back, the food was good. The vibe was good, we weren't getting rich, but we were making it. For years after being abandoned. I made enough to help Kendra with her med school loans, not all of them, those things are monstrous, but enough to make a dent. She cried when I showed her the payment confirmation, not movie crying with perfect mascara tears, real crying, snotty, red-faced, hiccuping crying. I'd never felt more like a real person than in that moment. Then my grandmother died. I found out through Facebook. Mom posted this long dramatic tribute with a million heart emojis. Grandma Rose had been the only one in the family who ever stood up to Banks, the only one who seemed to see me. She used to slip me $20 bills when no one was looking, tell me to save it for my escape. I think she meant college, turns out it was more literal than that. I thought about going to the funeral, even looked up flights. Kendra said she'd come with me, hold my hand through the whole awful reunion. Doug offered his crappy hatchback if I wanted to drive instead. Geraldine just shrugged and said, dead people don't know if you're there or not, so do what brings you peace. I didn't go, instead I sent flowers, generic sympathy arrangement, signed the card. Salvador, no return address, no note. The explosion on social media was immediate. Mom posting about signs and reaching out from beyond. Alan making cryptic comments about prodigal sons. Banks saying nothing publicly, but I could imagine the storm behind closed doors. A week later, I got a friend request from a profile I didn't recognize, some random name, no posts, no friends. I almost deleted it until I saw the message, it's Uncle Rick, your mom gave me your old email but it bounced back. Are you okay? We've been worried, your dad has been asking around about you. I blocked the account that night. I had my first panic attack in 2 years, sitting on our bathroom floor at 3 a.m., trying not to wake Kendra, feeling like my lungs were collapsing, imagining Banks hunting me down, showing up at Sonny's, destroying everything I'd built. Kendra found me there an hour later, didn't ask questions, just sat with me, her shoulder touching mine. When I could finally breathe again, she said the simplest thing, they can't take anything from you that you don't give them. The next morning I called a lawyer, got advice on restraining orders, just in case. I tightened privacy settings on everything, asked Geraldine to alert staff not to give out information about me to anyone, practical steps, control what you can control. 5 years to the day after being abandoned. I married Kendra, small ceremony at a state park. Doug was my best man. Geraldine made the cake and cried through the whole thing, mascara running down her wrinkled cheeks. Kendra's large, loud family adopted me instantly, her dad making dad jokes that somehow didn't make me flinch, her mom hugging me without setting off alarm bells in my head. That's the thing about family, sometimes it finds you when you've stopped looking. A week after the wedding, scrolling through my dummy account late at night. I saw it, a post from Banks on a community page, looking for information on my son Salvador, last known location Grand Junction, Colorado, family emergency. There was no emergency. I knew that much, what I didn't know was why, after 5 years of nothing, they were suddenly looking for me. So I dug deeper, created another fake account, joined the community groups from my hometown, pieced it together bit by bit, the hardware store had closed, their house was in foreclosure. Mom had some medical issues she was vague booking about. Alan had moved back home after his third DUI. They weren't looking for me because they missed me, they were looking for me because they needed something, and you know what, for the first time in 5 years. I smiled when I thought about them, not because I was happy about their misfortune, but because I realized something important. I didn't care anymore. I closed the laptop, crawled into bed next to my sleeping wife, and made a decision. I would keep watching from a distance, not out of hate, not out of love, but because sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do, it's what you build while they're busy destroying themselves. Finally, update. 15 years after being abandoned at that Colorado rest stop. My carefully constructed life had a glitch. Someone had viewed my profile 27 times in one day. Not unusual for LinkedIn recruiters do weird stuff like that all the time. What was unusual was the name, Alan Matthew. My brother. That's the thing about the past. It's patient. It'll wait in the tall grass for years before it strikes. By then my life looked nothing like that first year in Grand Junction. Kendra had finished med school, done her residency, and now worked at a local clinic 3 days a week so she could be home with our kids more. We had two, Ellie, 7, and Marcus, 4. The apartment above the laundromat had given way to a modest 4-bedroom on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, but with a yard where the kids could play, and I could grow tomatoes that never quite turned out right. Sonny's had expanded to 3 locations. Still not some massive franchise or anything, but enough that I didn't have to work the line anymore except when someone called in sick. Geraldine had semi-retired 2 years earlier. Though she still showed up unannounced to criticize the way we made her pie crust recipe, I'd made peace with my past. Or so I thought. I still kept tabs on the family from a distance. But the constant checking had faded to maybe once every few months. Last I knew, Banks and Irene had moved to a smaller place after losing the house. Alan had gotten married, divorced, then married again. They'd all seemingly moved on with their lives as I had with mine. The LinkedIn thing rattled me, though. 15 years of silence, and now this. I mentioned it to Kendra as we were doing our regular Sunday night thing. Folding laundry while half watching whatever Netflix show we were currently behind on. She paused, a mismatched sock in each hand, and asked if I was okay. I nodded. Because what else could I say? That I was suddenly a 22-year-old again. Stranded at a rest stop. That I could feel Banks's voice in my head calling me worthless. 3 days later, I was at Sunny's East. The original second location, helping with inventory because our supplier had sent the wrong kind of coffee filters again. When Maya at the front called back that there was some family asking for me, my first thought was Kendra's parents, who sometimes surprised us when they were passing through. I headed out front, mental gears already shifting to how to convince them to stay for dinner. It wasn't Kendra's family. Banks looked older, grayer. His formerly imposing frame somehow shrunken. Irene's face had that pinched look that comes from years of worry. Her hair dyed an unnatural shade of brown. And Alan looked like Banks had at 40. Same stance. Same way of taking up space. There was a woman with them I didn't recognize. Young. Maybe early 20s. Hanging back like she wasn't sure she belonged in this moment. Nobody spoke. The lunch rush noise seemed to fade away, until all I could hear was my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Banks broke first. Said my name like a question. I nodded. Because my voice had apparently gone on vacation. Look, I'd imagined this moment 1,000 different ways over 15 years. In some versions I told them off spectacularly. In others I was cool and distant, unbothered by their existence. In a few embarrassing late-night scenarios we even had tearful reconciliation. Reality is always messier than imagination. I gestured to an empty table in the corner. Told Maya to bring waters. Sat down across from the people who had once been my family. And waited. They'd found me through that magazine article. Rocky Mountain Rising. 10 local success stories. It wasn't even a big feature. Just a sidebar with a photo of me in front of Sunny's original location. But apparently one of Mom's friends from high school had moved to Colorado. Seen it, and sent it to her with a, "Isn't this your son, mess?" 107 missed calls. That's how many they'd made to my old number over the years before it was disconnected. Mom had kept count. She mentioned this like it was supposed to mean something. They talked over each other. Mom about how worried they'd been. Banks about how I'd misunderstood what happened that day. Alan awkwardly trying to act like we were old buddies catching up. The young woman, Alan's second wife, Poppy, it turned out, just watched me with curious eyes. I let them talk. Watched them spin their version of reality where they weren't the villains. Noticed how Banks kept eyeing the restaurant, mentally calculating what it might be worth. Saw how Mom's hand trembled slightly when she reached for her water. Caught Alan's practice charm slipping whenever he thought I wasn't looking directly at him. Finally, when they ran out of steam, I asked the only question that mattered. Why now? That's when the real story came out. In bits and pieces. Between awkward silences, Banks had medical bills, heart problems, no insurance. The second house was being foreclosed on. Alan's business venture, something vague involving cryptocurrency, had failed spectacularly. Mom needed knee surgery she couldn't afford. They weren't there for reconciliation. They were there for money. I should have been angry. Should have thrown them out. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity. They looked so small. So desperate. These giants who had once controlled my whole world were just flawed, broken people. I invited them to dinner at my house that night. Said I needed to think. To talk to Kendra. They agreed eagerly. Banks already halfway to considering it a done deal. That afternoon was surreal. I picked Ellie up from her dance class. Helped Marcus with his preschool show and tell preparation. All while texting Kendra updates about who was coming to dinner. She offered to take the kids to her sister's. I said no. I wanted them there. Wanted my family to meet my family. Dinner was chicken enchiladas. My specialty. That wasn't really special. Just a recipe from the back of an old El Paso box that I tweaked over the years. Ellie set the table without being asked, carefully placing forks on the wrong side until Kendra quietly corrected her. Marcus insisted on wearing his Spider-Man costume because it was Tuesday. And apparently Tuesday was now Spider-Man Day. When the doorbell rang, I almost dropped the dish I was carrying to the table. Kendra squeezed my arm as she passed. Whispered that she had my back no matter what. The kids looked up curiously, sensing something important was happening. That's the thing about moments you've dreaded. When they finally arrive, they're simultaneously worse and better than you imagined. Introductions were awkward. Banks kept calling Kendra Karen despite corrections. Irene couldn't stop crying whenever she looked at the kids, which was freaking Marcus out. Alan and Poppy were the least awful, making actual efforts at normal conversation. Though Alan kept dropping hints about family helping family. After dinner, Kendra took the kids upstairs for baths and bedtime, giving me a look that clearly said, "Text if you need extraction." Then it was just me and them, sitting in a living room that suddenly felt too small. Banks started in on the pitch, how family sticks together, how he'd always known I'd make something of myself. Lie. How they just needed a little help to get back on their feet. $20,000, just a loan. Of course, I let him finish. Then I asked him if he remembered what he said to me on my 18th birthday. He looked blank. I reminded him, "At least you can't disappoint me anymore once you're not legally my problem." I asked Mom if she remembered what she did when Banks threw my acceptance letter to community college in the trash. Nothing. She'd done nothing. I asked Alan if he remembered telling my first girlfriend I was probably gay anyway when she came to the house looking for me. They squirmed, made excuses. Banks started to get that dangerous edge to his voice that used to make me shrink. But here's the thing, I wasn't shrinking anymore. I was 15 years and a million miles from that person. I went to my office, came back with an envelope, handed it to Banks. Inside was a check for $73.50. Banks looked at it confused, asked what the hell this was supposed to be. I told him, in 2010, that was exactly what a Greyhound ticket from Grand Junction to our hometown would have cost. The exact amount it would have taken for me to make it back home from where they abandoned me. The silence was absolute. Then Banks started shouting, called me ungrateful, selfish, said I'd always been a disappointment. The greatest hits album of my childhood playing one last time. I didn't argue, didn't shout back, just stood up and told them it was time to leave. Mom tried a different approach. Tears, guilt. How could I do this to family? Alan went cold. The mask of friendly brother completely dropped. Poppy just looked embarrassed for all of them. When they finally left, Banks crumpling the check and throwing it on our front step. I closed the door and leaned against it, legs suddenly shaky. Kendra came downstairs, asked if I was okay. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We cleaned up the dinner dishes in silence, checked on the sleeping kids, got ready for bed like it was any other night. As I was setting the security system, I pulled up the front door camera on my phone. They were still in the driveway, arguing, Banks gesturing wildly, Mom crying, Alan looking at our house with an expression I recognized too well. Envy mixed with hatred. Finally, they got in their rental car and drove away. I've never seen or heard from them again. Don't expect to. The chapter is closed. That's the thing about revenge. The best kind isn't something you do. It's something you live. Every happy moment with my kids. Every inside joke with Kendra. Every quiet Sunday morning with nothing to fear. Every single ordinary day in a life built on my terms. I never made it back home. I did something better. I built one. Now for a little commentary. What a roller coaster. From being abandoned at that rest stop to standing up to banks with that $73.50 check. This story had me hooked. I've got to say, Salvador's strength in walking away and building his own family was inspiring. That dinner scene where he flipped the script on them, chef's kiss, and seeing karma catch up with Alan's DUI and the family's downfall? Perfect timing. My take? This proves the best revenge is living well. Salvador nailed it. Thanks for coming along for the ride. Wild, right? Drop your thoughts on Salvador's journey in the comments and subscribe for more tales like this. See you next time.